Raptors Digest, what's up? Welcome back. We're now on to our third installment of the King of the North segment. We haven't been as regular with the segment as we want to be. Obviously, school examinations, other stuff for the Raptors Digest that doesn't necessarily go on YouTube takes some time. So it's taken a bit out of this segment, but we want to keep it rolling throughout the end of the season. There's not that many games left, but there is a ton of Canadians playing great to talk about. So we're going to keep it steady. And without further ado, let's get into it. Today, rather than opening the video with a list of honorable mentions, I'm going to go right into breaking down Canadian performers from this past stretch who balled out recently as this week, and I'm going to go with those storylines, and at the end of it, I'm going to crown my winner based on what I've said. So you guys get engaged in the comments, tell me what you think, and make sure to wait until the end of the video to see my Canadian power rankings. First off, we haven't talked about him yet on this segment, but he's been a player that's steadily improved all year for the New Orleans Pelicans. Yes, sir, I'm talking about Nikhil Alexander-Walker, the Toronto native, the 22-year-old shooting guard that played for the Virginia Hokies. So we're going to be breaking down his play as of late because it's been remarkable. As a 6'6" guard with a silky shooting stroke, it's just no wonder why so many teams were interested in the Canadian coming up. He ended up being taken 17th overall by the Brooklyn Nets, who immediately traded him over to the New Orleans Pelicans, who during the 2019 draft class were welcoming in Zion. So a new generation of players hitting New Orleans at that time. Leading up to this next level of success, Nikhil actually shows a development story that's really uniquely Canadian. We see a ton of top prospects from the north head south, go to high school at American schools. Certainly not knocking that decision. It's great for exposure and whatnot, but we got to give extra props to Nikhil and his cousin, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who assembled forces at Hamilton Heights and did great together and carved a path out to the NBA. So that is something extremely noteworthy, and I cannot wait until the FIBA World Cup this summer to see those two play together. It's bigger than Canada now. It's family ties as well. And all of this is really great, but I'm going to get back on topic to what's most amazing, and that's Nikhil balling out at the NBA level. He's been injured since April 4th with an ankle injury, but if you look at the sample size leading up to then, it is really good and encouraging in terms of comparing his regular statistics to what he's doing at the moment. You can see some clear improvement, and I'll put the stats up on the screen. When you look at his regular season stats and also his career stats, you can tell this guy has always been a really solid prospect, but his last 10 games, it's blowing his ceiling way up. So you look at what he's shooting, it's over 42%. You look at what he's averaging, 16.5, that's way up. And then the defensive numbers, oh my God, it's night and day to what he's doing at this moment to what he typically does. So you really need to hope that that's a consistent for Nikhil, because if he can become a 3-and-D type shooting guard, that is a massive asset to a championship team. We see that in guys like Danny Green, a bunch of different marksmen in the league. I think he has potential like that. Individual stats like this, they look awesome. We can feel good about them. It's really great, but players themselves want wins. And that's what we're seeing with Nikhil early. I know that the New Orleans Pelicans are young and they need to fight through the Western Conference, which is a very tall task. But in that span of 10 games when he was playing really hot, they went 5-5, including some wins over the Lakers, the Celtics, the Mavericks, and then they beat the Nuggets twice. So clearly, when this team's playing well, when Nikhil's bringing his A game, they can really do something even in the West. The next player I'm talking about, it's the beloved Cory Joseph. So he was just traded from the Sacramento Kings over to the Detroit Pistons, and since getting there, he has helped to fill their playmaking void great. Killian Hayes, he's injured. Derrick Rose, he's traded. They weren't a great team to begin with, so they need some answers on who's going to pass the ball, who's going to break it out, who's going to make plays for them, and that answer is slowly becoming Cory Joseph, and the stats prove it. I'll include Cory's game log from the past 8 or so games in the video just so you can see the numbers he's putting up since arriving in Detroit. I think he's settling right in. The deal already looks pretty good for what they want out of him. I'm always happy for Cory, and another cool storyline about this trade, he was moved for DeLon Wright, a former Raptor, and then he's reunited with former Raptors head coach Dwayne Casey. So that's a lot of cool stuff going on, and pretty much right as soon as he got in there, he got a matchup against Sacramento, who just traded him. He drops 24 and gets the win. So it was personal that night. I'm thrilled to see that for Cory, but the passing is really the most important part of what's going on here. He's been averaging 3.2 assists this entire season, but after landing in Detroit, you look at his past 10 games, that's when you start to see a big jump. He's facilitating the ball at a crazy rate. He's up to averaging 6.2 assists per game over the past 10. And then also, he dropped 13 assists in his most recent game, complementing it with 18 points. He's looking like a floor general who's ready to go. Now I'm going to pick things up where the last video ended off. RJ Barrett, he was our reigning king of the North, and since the last time we filmed, the case for him to retain the crown is just as encouraging. He has been balling out, and it's becoming customary for the young Canadian. There is a lot to be excited about in RJ's game and how it's blossomed, how he's continuing to develop. We'll see more of that to come, but the scoring is really who he is at heart. He is a scorer. A lot of people coming out of college said, okay, this guy's a lefty. He's got a really bad shot selection. Like, does he think he's going to be the next James Harden? Because that's really the only lefty shooter that's that elite. All this stuff, right? There was a lot of reasonable questions, some unreasonable, a lot of doubt nonetheless. He's put that to rest. If you look at his past 5 games, he's got 14, 22, 29, 20, and most recently, he dropped 19 on the Raptors. And the way he's doing this is so efficient. We touched on it last video, but I'll bring up the stats from more recently on how it's just been a continued trend for him. Over the past 10 games, RJ's gotten back to shooting over 50% from 3. His shot selection, although it was critiqued early in his career, looks great to me. He's averaging 18.8 overall, and the Knicks are back to a 500 record at 27-27, which means they are ready to be looking into the playoff picture this year. And if you know anything about the NBA, you know that is an absolute rarity for the Knicks. This surprising turnaround for the Knicks organization largely falls on their young players. You have an aspiring star in Julius Randle. You have RJ Barrett, Emmanuel Quickly, all these guys. But it comes down to Tom Thibodeau playing a really, really smart defensive system. And what I like about RJ in that system is he has the length, the athleticism, and the IQ to play really well. So even if he's not an elite type individual one-on-one defender, he's still going to look really good in Thibodeau's system, and he has looked really good. Of the past few games, the Memphis Grizzlies matchup definitely takes the cake. They came into town on a 4-game win streak. They were really hot. They're obviously one of my favorite teams. I love the Grizz, but RJ Barrett drops 20, forces overtime, and then drains their hopes of winning that game with 1:15 left, hitting a tie-breaking 3. So huge stuff from RJ. We always hear that we want the star factor out of him. He's under the lights of MSG. He's got a lot of pressure, but in moments like this, he really looks capable of rising up and hitting those big, elusive moment shots. Lastly, he might not be the most conventional or even consistent, but we gotta mention the slim duck, Chris Boucher, and what he's been doing for the Raptors in the middle of a really struggling season where they don't have a lot of their lineup. Free agencies picked everyone over. Adaptability seems to be the key for Chris, and he's showing that. As it would turn out, the addition of Aaron Baines, don't get me wrong, we love Baines, we love the career he's had, but it doesn't fit with our team right now. He is washed up in the most polite way. And then we got Chris Boucher, who's very hungry off the bench. And when he's been given that starting role, even though he doesn't traditionally do what you'd expect out of your starting center, he brings a lot of different assets, like a 3-point shot, like elite rim protection, which is very stereotypical of a center. But then inversely, he doesn't give you a lot of mid-range bag. He is a little bit of an undersized guy for the position, and the lack of experience is another thing there too. So we've worried about that. We haven't been rebounding as well, right? People are like, oh, Chris isn't big enough to fight in there. I'm sure these comments have got to him. He's been developing, and what really shows this to me is the loss that we had against Chicago. As the starting center versus the Bulls, who had just freshly acquired Vucevic and Daniel Theis, so 2 guys who are going to make it difficult for most NBA opposition. They're in the lineup. Chris goes out, drops a career-high 38 points, as well as gets active on the glass with a career-high 19 rebounds. So he can go out there, he can compete. We are seeing that he's broadening his bag to help accommodate that starting center role, because these points, you could hear the stat line and just assume, okay, Chris drops 38. How many 3-pointers did he have? Because that's what the guy does. You know, that'd be the likely assumption from a lot of fans. But in reality, the Chicago game blew my mind because I was watching him hit shots that normally he won't even attempt. I should mention that he was still 3 of 7 from 3-point range, which really solid for a big man. We'll take that. But 38 points, the majority came off of mid-range looks that, again, normally are just 4 into Chris. You can even look at the last clip of the game, his very last shot to put him from 36 to 38. It was just within the 3-point line, and he stepped back on his defender to hit it. So this is a shot that not many players take, and especially not Chris Boucher. And I'm not saying he should now polarize his game to that kind of fashion, but adding to his bag, like I've been saying, this is something that will help solidify him not only with the Raptors, but as someone in the league who demands respect. Consistency has been a spotty area for Chris, but in my opinion, the more floor time he gets, especially as a starter, the better you'll see him polish off that bag that I want him to have. So that's good stuff. And then most recently against the Knicks, he dropped 17 points, 14 rebounds, had 4 blocks, and 0 turnovers. So he's taking breaks of games, it seems. You know, some games he'll have 9 or 10 points, and then he explodes. We need something more consistent from Chris, but let's remember, this is an adaptability thing, right? Chris is not in an ideal system. He doesn't have other big men there to support him, so he's biting off a lot most nights, and especially when we're dressing 9 to 10 guys. All things considered, Chris is balling out. The Knicks game helped show that, and his defensive stats are just as good as they normally are. And I talk about getting another big and how it would help Chris and just our team in general. Well, it did happen. We got Burch. He was waived by the Orlando Magic for more playing time in what they suspected to be Toronto, and that ended up happening. We've been linked to him for a long time. You can ask Leo Routens. He's always wanted to see Burch in a Raptors jersey. In a sense, so have I, because he's just such a hustle player. We need rebounds. That's what he's known for. But his performance against the Knicks, it was underwhelming. He's not the savior of this team. We certainly need to respect his desire to walk to Toronto, essentially in a mid-season free agency, and sign with us when we're basically a chaotic dumpster fire, right? We really need to give big props to our Canadian boy for coming home during a situation like that, and I hope he continues to be on the roster, not only into next year, but in the years after, in a role that really suits him. So my final decision, it's locked in. I'm going with RJ Barrett to retain the King of the North title this week. All things considered, the Knicks are doing really well, way better than anyone expected. RJ is putting the haters to silence still. All of this, and last segment that we filmed on this, I gave him title Prince of the North because we were including SGA and also Jamal Murray, which, as I'm sure you've noticed, I haven't discussed yet. SGA has been hurt, and Jamal Murray is just reaching a point of superstar consistency. I mean, you can turn on ESPN and hear about both those guys, and for sure I'm going to be touching on them throughout the season. But all these things considered, I'm going to try to give more of a spotlight to players who don't have that ESPN platform. So RJ Barrett, he is King of the North. I hope you guys agree, but if you don't, toss in the comments why and explain. I love to get interactive with the community here at the Raptors Digest.